The evidence is that he ran for president with a platform that specifically said in black and white that they were against marriage equality.
And like this is today.
So they've kind of rubbed that out of the platform since the last time he ran for president, but the people he put on the court are contributing to a majority that already took away a woman's right to choose and doesn't seem very interested in protecting my right to marry, nor did he do anything to help get that legislation passed.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg didn't think that Roe v. Wade was the appropriate statute on which to be hanging reproductive freedom. And Obama campaigned in 2007. There was a bill introduced to the 110th Congress, H.R. 1964, the Freedom of Choice Act. He campaigned. The first thing I'm going to do as president is sign that bill. Once he was elected, I quote, "Not my highest legislative priority. I don't know why I should actually trust Democrats to enshrine reproductive rights as national law, because they had the opportunity so many times over the past decades. Most recently, in 2009, 2010, they didn't do it." Kamala's coming here and campaigning in Michigan on reproductive freedom. Guess what? It's part of our state constitution. Like, that's manipulation of voters.
All right, guys, so we got to talk about this pretty fascinating exchange between Pete Buttigieg and an undecided female voter who has cut through the propaganda of the Democrat Party and is challenging Pete Buttigieg on this idea that under Kamala Harris, there will be more rights and freedoms than under President Trump, which we all know that that's just simply not the case. The Democrats are actively trying to take away people's rights and freedoms, mainly the right to bear arms, okay, and also your free speech rights, okay? We know that they're actively trying to do this, but yet Pete Buttigieg wants to pretend as if they're not, okay? And Trump is the one trying to do this, although that's just simply not the case. So I want to go ahead and talk about it, but before we get into it, we have to have a word from the sponsor of this video, Aura. This year has seen a number of high-profile data breaches that are raising serious concerns about personal information security. Dell suffered a breach that exposed 3.9 million customers, including sensitive personal information. AT&T exposed 2 breaches affecting 2.5 million customers and impacting another 9 million customers. Finally, Ticketmaster experienced a massive breach compromising over 560 million customer records. But the most alarming of them all, just a few months ago, National Public Data announced that they had suffered a massive breach affecting almost every American. The incident compromised over 2.9 billion records, including information used in background checks such as your full name, your address, your phone number, and most importantly, social security numbers. And it gets worse. It has been confirmed that members of this hacker group have released this personal sensitive information online for free. If you haven't been taking your personal information online seriously, now is the time to change that, because in today's environment, you're more exposed than ever before. Thankfully, I feel secure because I use Aura, today's sponsor. Aura monitors your personal data, including your social security number, across billions of data points like the dark web and public court records to alert you about any potential identity theft. They also provide up to $5 million in identity theft insurance just in case the worst happens. Plus, Aura offers you a variety of other features to keep you safe online, including real-time alerts for data breaches, a VPN for secure browsing, data broker opt-out to stop companies from selling your personal information online, a password manager to help you create and store passwords, and much more. I'm not leaving myself or my family vulnerable to data breaches, and if you don't want to either, then you can go to aura.com/BCP to try 2 weeks for free. That will be enough time for Aura to find out if any of your personal information has been exposed.
My next claim is Americans will have more rights and freedoms under a Harris-Walz administration.
Nice to meet you.
Same here.
My name's Grace.
Grace, good night.
Frankly, I'm shocked that you would make that claim. I think I would love to know what the basis of that is, some specific examples.
Yeah.
Starting with freedom of speech.
Sure.
If you could.
Let's start with freedom of speech. So Donald Trump has said that he wants to revoke the licenses of television networks that have broadcast coverage that he disagrees with. I can't think of a more direct attack on the freedom of speech than a government official or a wannabe government official saying, I want to punish a television network because of their journalism, right? So That's how I feel about free speech. There's also more personal rights, a woman's right to choose, my right to have this ring on my finger, that I feel are much more secure if she's in charge than if he's in charge.
All right. So before she rebuts Pete Buttigieg, let's just start here, okay, with the whole Trump and the broadcast licenses thing. Yes, it is true that networks do not have broadcast licenses, okay, but individual news stations do, okay? And the argument from the president is that, hey, a lot of these individual stations, again, at the direction of the network as a whole, they are broadcasting propaganda, right? They are overtly lying, and they're using their journalism in order to push propaganda on behalf of Democrats. Now, this is something that is happening, and it's very overt, right? Everybody can see it, right? Like, for example, recently we just talked about NBC and allowing Kamala Harris on SNL, okay? They went out of their way to subvert FCC rules when it comes to equal time right before an election in order to allow Kamala Harris on the platform. Now, they did this because Kamala Harris, they know, is struggling, and they're trying to help her out right before the election. Now, the FCC commissioner came out and said, yeah, we need to investigate this, including potentially revoking their licenses, which I'm assuming he's talking about the individual news stations that are affiliated with NBC for allowing Kamala Harris on SNL without giving equal time to another candidate.
And what should be the ramification here?
Yeah, we need to keep every single remedy on the table. I mean, one of the remedies the FCC has ultimately would be license revocation if we find that it's egregious, and we'll see what they have to say about this. But it needs to deter this type of conduct, because when you're 50 hours before the opening of Election Day, the whole purpose of this rule is to give people a fair shot.
Right? Again, this is the example of what Trump is talking about when it comes to this idea that these networks are not operating in public interest, which is a part of their license, okay, the individual station. So Trump suggesting that there be an investigation into these networks for lying and pushing Democrat propaganda, trying to affect the outcome of the election, which we know they're doing. That's not an attack on free speech as much as that is an attack on propaganda, okay? Because at this point, these mainstream liberal media networks have become arms of the Democrat Party, and they are trying to subvert laws, federal laws, in order to help Democrats, okay? We've seen this, okay? We know this, right? Also, on top of that, furthermore, you have to look at what President Trump has said versus the things that he's actually done. For example, Trump has talked about this since 2017, investigating these networks for blatant propaganda. Now, for all of his presidency, we all know that all of these networks have been extremely anti-Trump. They've lied about Trump when it comes to numerous things, like, for example, the Russia hoax, okay? And what did he do? He did not revoke any of their licenses, okay? He didn't do any of these things. One, because he really doesn't have the power to do so as president, which is something that Pete Buttigieg is leaving out here conveniently, because again, he's pushing propaganda. And two, he's simply just calling on the FCC to do their damn jobs, right? To launch investigations into these networks. And if appropriate, okay, then maybe there needs to be some type of punishment for these networks clearly, obviously, trying to sway the outcome of the election in favor of the Democrats, which we know for a fact that this is what they're doing, right? So again, Pete Buttigieg is trying to fearmonger about something Trump said, when Trump is simply calling for the FCC to do their job. You just saw the commissioner come out here and say, yeah, this is actually what's happening. We should investigate this because this is wrong. But the reality is that Trump, even as president, didn't do any of the things that this guy is fearmongering about Trump doing in his second term, okay? But what did Democrats actually do? Well, let's examine what they did. And we know this for a fact. The Biden-Harris administration went out of their way to try to pressure social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter, before it was owned by Elon Musk, to censor information they did not like that went against the Democrats' narrative and their propaganda when it comes to the pandemic, right? We know this for certain. They were sued over it, and this is the type of stuff, okay, that Democrats are actively trying to do. So you talk about free speech rights, okay? Democrats, they're not just saying that, hey, we want to censor so-called hate speech and you shouldn't be allowed to say the things that you want on the internet if we don't agree with it. They actually have weaponized the government to attempt to stop people from being able to do these things, okay? So again, what we have here is, well, things that Trump says that never happened, that he never did, that he really doesn't have the power to do, versus things that Democrats are actively saying, and they weaponize the government to try to do those things, right? And in some cases have been successful because they have convinced these platforms to censor speech that Democrats don't like because of misinformation/disinformation, regardless of whether or not the information was true. Just saying. I'm just saying.
And the evidence you have of Donald Trump being against gay marriage or wanting to roll back protections for gay folks to be married is what exactly?
The evidence is that he ran for president with a platform that specifically said in black and white that they were against marriage equality.
And like this is today.
So they've kind of rubbed that out of the platform since the last time he ran for president, but the people he put on the court are contributing to a majority that already took away a woman's right to choose and doesn't seem very interested in protecting my right to marry, nor did he do anything to help get that legislation passed when
Ruth
the
Bader
Biden-Harris administration
Ginsburg
passed
didn't
it.
think that Roe v. Wade was the appropriate statute on which to be hanging reproductive freedom. And Obama campaigned in 2007. There was a bill introduced to the 110th Congress, H.R. 1964, the Freedom of Choice Act. He campaigned, the first thing I'm going to do as president is sign that bill. Once he was elected, I quote, "Not my highest legislative priority. I don't know why I should actually trust Democrats to enshrine reproductive rights as national law, because they had the opportunity so many times over the past decades. Most recently in 2009, 2010, they didn't do it." Kamala's coming here and campaigning in Michigan on reproductive freedom. Guess what? It's part of our state constitution. Like, that's
Right.
manipulation of voters.
Well, I don't think that's manipulation. Look, the whole
Yes,
point of a
it is.
national right, I live in Michigan, right? But if I take my kids with my husband to their first ever Notre Dame game and I cross the state line,
Right.
obviously I'm talking about marriage equality, not reproductive freedom here, but just as an illustration of why a national right is important. I don't want my marriage to evaporate the moment I cross the Michigan-Indiana state line. What she's talking about is that a national right should be national. It's true, you have great leaders here in Michigan who have taken action at the state level to protect reproductive rights. But since when does civil rights disappear at state lines? And how is it pro-freedom to take away a national protection and say, well, if some state wants to take away this freedom, have at it? We went through this as a country with the civil rights era. We're definitely going through this right now on something like choice, where your rights in Alabama are different than they are in Michigan, right?
Yeah, so I love this response from this woman. By the way, this woman is obviously leaning towards voting for Trump, right? I'm not sure exactly what's stopping her at this point because she's doing a good job at dismissing the propaganda from Democrats. And again, this guy right here, Pete Buttigieg, it's important to break down these conversations because Democrats and liberals tout this guy as their top debater, right? This is their top intellect in the Democrat Party. However, you got to actually listen to what Democrats say. And when you actually listen to what they say and you can see through the propaganda, right, by breaking down what they're actually saying, they don't sound all that smart, right? Like, for example, when you dismiss the framing here from Pete Buttigieg, which is that abortion is a right, what he's saying doesn't make sense. Abortion is not a right, okay? But his framing of the abortion issue is essentially the same framing as gay marriage, right? In the sense that he's basically saying that, well, abortion is a constitutional right, which is not, okay? The Supreme Court has already established that that's not the case. And this woman right here correctly brought up the fact that two things. Ruth Bader Ginsburg agreed that, hey, Roe v. Wade is probably not the proper basis in which abortion rights should be protected in this country. It should probably be done at the state level because it is truly a state issue. Again, Democrats hate democracy and they also hate the 10th Amendment. Okay, they hate states' rights. Furthermore, Democrats had an opportunity to attempt to enshrine Roe v. Wade into law, but they chose not to do it. And that, in my opinion, is likely what you're going to see happen even if Kamala Harris is elected, because one, she's going to have a hard time enshrining Roe v. Wade into law, okay, if she's elected. She's going to have a hard time doing it, but I don't think she's actually going to really want to do it because Democrats benefit from abortion being a political football, right? They benefit from this idea that, hey, these states are able to ban abortion. So therefore, you need to vote for us at the federal level in order to codify Roe v. Wade into law, which we don't really know if they can actually do that legally. Okay, we really don't know. Okay, but this idea that Democrats somehow are going to codify Roe v. Wade into law is ridiculous for a couple reasons. Kamala's not going to have enough support for it, one. Two, on top of that, even if they do it, it can be challenged in court. And it may not work with this current Supreme Court. Also, three, they don't really have a political incentive to do it because, again, they can just campaign on ignorance, right? They can campaign on, well, we don't have enough votes because Republicans are stopping us from doing it. So therefore, you got to keep voting for Democrats, okay? They're going to want to keep maintaining power and control based off this issue. So I don't even think they're going to even attempt to do it because the issue for them just works out very well in regards to rallying people to vote for them. Furthermore, Pete Buttigieg tries to extrapolate what's happening with abortion to, well, this is what could happen with gay rights and gay marriage. But again, what he's conveniently leaving out is that, one, this is not the same issue. And he's only coming to this conclusion because Clarence Thomas said that we should revisit Obergefell versus Hodges. But even if that was overturned, which is unlikely that it will be overturned, and I just want people to understand that Obergefell versus Hodges essentially prohibits bans on same-sex marriage, right? It does not allow states to ban same-sex marriage, and they have to respect same-sex marriage. They have to recognize it, okay? Even if that was overturned, because Democrats and Republicans, okay, agreed in 2022 to pass the Respect for Marriage Act, which basically codifies same-sex marriage at the federal level. It requires states not to necessarily offer same-sex marriage, but they have to respect same-sex marriage if an individual gets married in another state that allows it. Essentially, if Obergefell versus Hodges was overturned, it really wouldn't matter because it's already been codified into law, okay? So in order for same-sex marriage to be under attack, first, Obergefell versus Hodges would have to be overturned, which is unlikely, okay? And then after that, the Respect for Marriage Act would have to be repealed by Congress, which also is extremely unlikely. So again, this dude is fear-mongering about nothing, right? I mean, so again, you have to actually understand these issues. They're fear-mongering about things that are not going to happen, okay? And that's the problem with Democrats. They are trying to take advantage of people's ignorance, especially on this issue of abortion. Abortion is not a constitutional right. The gay marriage stuff, at the very least, they cite the 14th Amendment, okay? The 14th Amendment, equal protection, as to why states can't ban gay marriage, okay? And this is something that has been upheld in the courts for the past 10 years, basically, okay? The difference with abortion is that Roe v. Wade, as Ruth Bader Ginsburg thought, was based on the wrong legal reasoning, okay? They based it off of the right to privacy instead of equal protection, okay? Ruth Bader Ginsburg thought that a much better argument that would not make Roe v. Wade legally incorrect would be to make it a gender equality issue rather than a right to privacy issue, okay? And this is why Roe v. Wade ultimately was overturned, is because it was not based on sound legal reasoning, okay? So now it's a state's issue. Unless the Democrats can come up with some sound legal argument as to why the federal government should regulate abortion, right? Why abortion is a constitutional right instead of just saying it, coming up with a legal argument for why it is a right. They don't have a snowball's chance in hell of codifying Roe v. Wade into law. But again, that's not what they want these emotional women to know. They don't want them to know that, hey, we're making you fake promises. We're making you promises that we know we can't keep. And they're not even going to try to do it because they already know what this Supreme Court is going to get shot down. Okay, but they're going to continue to make this an issue while not really trying to do anything about it, which, again, they didn't do in the past, by the way. When they had an opportunity to do so, they didn't do so at all, okay? Well, again, the reason why is because they want to continue to rally women based off this issue. They're never going to solve this issue. Never, okay? It's a state's issue now, and that is the way that it should be. It's not a federal issue, and people should not be voting in federal elections based off abortion. It just shouldn't happen.
Right?
I do want to circle back to something you said about the number one thing you have as evidence for Donald Trump being against free speech is that he wants to revoke these licenses for campaign, like coverage he doesn't agree with. To what extent is it untrue coverage?
I think the whole idea of free speech is that people can go on a network and air opinions that you disagree with.
What about
And-
social media? Because
Yeah,
the Harris
well-
Waltz campaign wants to make it illegal to put misinformation or malinformation on social media.
Well,
I think
that's not true.
Well, that's what he said, and that's what she said.
At best,
Yeah, I mean, that's what Kamala Harris said, according to this fact check back in 2019. If you act as a megaphone for misinformation, we're going to hold you accountable as a community, adding that she would use the Department of Justice to do so. So Kamala Harris said in 2019, she would weaponize the federal government to essentially ban speech on the internet that she doesn't like. But according to great debater Pete Buttigieg, oh, well, that's not true. That's not true. That's not true. Well, that's what the Kamala Harris and Joe Biden administration actually tried to do. They actually tried to force social media platforms to ban speech that they didn't like. Okay, not only did Kamala say it, but she acted on it. Remember, Kamala Harris was the head of the so-called government disinformation board. You guys remember that? That disinformation board they tried to form that they scrapped because of so much backlash, right? Yeah, she was in charge of that. Okay, she was the head of that. Again, people like Pete Buttigieg pretend like, oh, well, we never tried to do that. We didn't do that. No, you did do that.
That's an extreme simplification. And it's not really true. I mean, look, nobody has made more statements about being willing to use the powers of government to shut down people who disagree with them than Donald Trump. And you think it's okay to shut down the license of a TV station?
I didn't say that.
Okay, I thought that was implied in your question when you said, what if it's untrue information that they're broadcasting?
Well, I'm just asking. He says a lot of off the wall things that
Right.
certainly, I'm not, and I don't stand behind a lot of what he says, but just if he's angry about coverage that is manipulative towards people, that happens a lot. I'd like to.
The whole idea of free speech is that the government doesn't get to decide,
Certainly, but then you have.
and Donald Trump doesn't get to decide.
Certainly, but I don't want Kamala Harris also to decide.
And neither does she, right? That's the point.
But
She's not going to
that's
threaten the licenses of stations that cover her unfavorably.
But they
she
threaten
never has. He
the
has.
Section 30, whatever it is, for social media.
Not based on unfavorable political coverage. Now there is
that's what
there
the
is an
Twitter
idea
files
there is an
were.
idea that social media companies need to be more accountable for their choices, especially when you look at how they're harming women and girls, for example, by what goes out on Instagram. Right? But that's not the same as a free speech debate.
No, it is the same as free speech. Again, listen to these clowns talk, bruh. This guy is basically saying, well, we do believe that social media platforms should be held accountable for the harm that they cause to girls in regards to, again, people's free speech, what they post on the internet. But we're not attacking free speech. That's not an attack on free speech, when that is by definition an attack on free speech. That's exactly what it is. But again, listen to how he frames it. I'm just saying, if this woman, who seems to be less of an emotional woman, if she takes her emotions out of it, she's voting for Trump, right? She's voting for Trump 100%. But if you buy into these emotional arguments that are not based on fact and reality, they're based on fear-mongering from Pete Buttigieg, then you'll probably vote for Kamala Harris. But you got to understand that these arguments are made out of emotion, not facts, not reality. Pete Buttigieg's whole argument against Trump is, well, he says a lot of things. He didn't act on them. He didn't act on them. His defense of Kamala Harris is that, well, I'm not going to acknowledge that she said things that she actually said. And them acting on these things that I claim that I'm against, well, it's different, right? It's different when we do it because we believe that we're protecting people when we want to ban hate speech. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.